living in the slums and still dare to enter the champion's gym?
Victoria Sterling smirked, her bitter laughter echoing across the gym. A young girl stepped in, Kesha Campbell, 18 years old, dark brown skin, worn-out shoes, clutching a faded sports bag. The room fell silent. Every gaze turned toward her. Victoria arched a brow, mocking, "A scholarship? Oh, sweetie, we train real athletes here, not tiny, broke little rats." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Kesha stood still, her hand tightening around her bag. She came from Jamaica, had been in America for only 6 months, living in a cramped room with 3 others. Working 16 hours a day just to survive, this scholarship was her only chance. Her eyes flickered with sadness, yet they stayed firm, unshaken by Victoria's scorn. But deep inside her, a hidden strength was waiting to erupt, a lightning bolt from Kingston, forged in hardship and street fights, ready to make everyone see her differently. The white afternoon light spilled across the polished wooden floor, where every drop of sweat shimmered like liquid metal. The rhythmic thud of punches mixed with the steady pulse of electronic music. In the mirrors, muscles flexed and glistened. This was not just a place to train, but a stage where people came to be seen. At the center of the room stood Victoria Sterling, 2-time world boxing champion, training with her private coach. She was beautiful, strong, confident, and arrogantly aware of it. Each punch landed like a declaration, "This is my kingdom." A phone camera sat on a tripod, live streaming. On screen, thousands of heart emojis floated upward as Victoria smiled at her viewers, showing off her toned arms and the aura she believed no one else deserved to have. Then the glass door opened. A young girl stepped inside. Small frame, worn-out shoes, clutching a faded gym bag. Kesha Campbell, 18, from Jamaica. Her dark brown skin stood out against the immaculate white space, and silence fell like a reflex in a room used to perfection. Victoria caught sight of her through the mirror, stopped mid-punch, and turned. Wiping sweat from her forehead with a sponsor-branded towel, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Well, look who just wandered into our little paradise." Laughter burst out. Kesha stood still, looking around, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. Her voice trembled slightly but did not break. "Sorry, I was told there's a youth scholarship program here." Victoria raised an eyebrow, amused as if she'd just heard a joke. "A scholarship? Oh, sweetheart, we train real athletes here, not run charity work." The crowd erupted in laughter. Some gave Kesha long, judgmental stares, as if she'd stepped into forbidden territory. But Kesha said nothing. There was sadness in her eyes, but behind it burned a quiet, immovable strength. Then, from the office, the head coach Tom Rodriguez emerged. A man in his 50s, solid build, weathered face, sharp eyes. He held a folder in his hand. "The scholarship program still exists," he said evenly, "and Kesha Campbell is on the approved list." Silence blanketed the room. Victoria turned slowly, smirking. "Really, Tom? You want to turn my gym into a charity center? I'm sure the sponsors will love that." Tom's voice dropped, firm and cold. "They pay for results, not prejudice." A faint whistle came from the back corner. No one else dared to speak. Victoria tilted her head slightly, then locked eyes with Kesha. "Fine. If the girl wants to stay, let's see if she deserves it. 3 rounds of sparring. If she survives, she trains here. If not, she can go back to mopping floors." Whispers rippled through the room. Tom looked at Kesha. He knew this wasn't an offer. It was a trap. A public humiliation set for a black girl in a white world. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Kesha, you don't have to do this. She's just trying to provoke you." Kesha kept her gaze on Victoria. Her voice was soft, yet it carried through the icy air. "I accept." Victoria let out a short laugh. "How adorable. Then get ready, scholarship girl." She turned to her phone, adjusted the angle, and smiled into the camera with practiced charm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest today who wants to challenge me. Let's see how long she lasts." The gym roared with laughter. Tom sighed and pointed toward the locker room. "Come on, I'll wrap your hands." The hallway to the locker room was narrow and dim, the yellow light flickering against old brick walls. The music had faded. Only footsteps and breathing filled the space. Kesha walked ahead in silence. Tom followed, speaking quietly. "She's a two-time world champion. Her right hand's powerful, her technique sharp, reflexes fast. If you're not confident, I can—" Kesha cut him off without turning around. "I didn't come here to win or lose. I came to survive." Tom stopped mid-step. He said nothing more. When Kesha turned, the light caught her sun-browned face and steady eyes. Calm, but burning with purpose. "She has experience, fame, and an audience," Kesha said softly. "But I have something she'll never understand." Tom looked at her, waiting. "And what's that?" Kesha answered quietly, each word landing heavy as stone. "Hunger." A long silence followed. Tom understood. It wasn't hunger of the body. It was the hunger to be seen, to be valued, to exist for real. He simply nodded and led her into the small room. No more words were needed. Only the sound of gauze sliding around wrists, the steady rhythm of breathing, and the quiet sense that a storm was building behind the door. When he finished taping her hands, Tom looked at her small, wiry fists. "You ever fought before?" Kesha pressed her lips together, then answered softly, "Enough to know who really wants to silence me." Tom just nodded. He patted her shoulder, his voice low but firm. "Get on the ring, Lightning." She lifted her head, a little startled by the nickname, one that had followed her through the rough years in Kingston. She smiled faintly. "I thought I'd left that name behind." Tom replied, "Names like that don't disappear. They just wait to be remembered." The door opened. Noise from the gym crashed in like a wave. People had gathered around the smaller ring, phones raised, flashes flickering non-stop. Victoria stepped onto the platform first. White gloves, brand new shorts, hair neatly tied back. She smiled, glancing at the crowd and the cameras. Kesha followed. Her gloves were dull red, her shoes worn through, but her stance was upright, her gaze unwavering. When the bell rang, everyone seemed to hold their breath. The girl from Jamaica inhaled deeply, relaxed her shoulders, and touched gloves with her opponent. Victoria tilted her head, sneering. "Ready to get taught a lesson?" Kesha didn't answer. She only looked straight into her eyes. A thick silence filled the air. The bell rang. The match began. As soon as the sound faded, Victoria slid forward half a step, chin tucked neatly behind her left shoulder, right hand drawing a light arc through the air. A testing jab, just to find range, not power, just precision. Kesha tilted her head, shoulders loose, front foot gliding like the tip of a needle touching water. The jab cut through empty space. No satisfying smack, only the whisper of air. Victoria changed rhythm, her footwork quickening, feinting left before darting right, jab, cross, her signature combo. This time, Kesha didn't back away. She didn't raise her guard in textbook defense either. She slipped, exactly half a hand's width, letting the cross skim past her cheek, close enough to feel its heat, but not its touch. She pivoted her rear foot, placing herself at a perfect 45-degree angle to Victoria's right shoulder. "Stay still, little girl," Victoria muttered with a dry laugh. "This ring isn't for running." She pressed forward, irritation flashing in her eyes, the kind of anger that comes from being defied in one's own kingdom. Around them, the crowd gasped and murmured, phones rising higher, cameras zooming closer. "Damn, she can move!" "It's fine, Vic's just warming up. Wait till she throws that right hook, game over." Their voices blended into a low hum, a cloud of sound settling over the polished floor. Kesha heard all of it and ignored all of it. Her breathing stayed low and steady, like the faint buzz of a fluorescent light overhead. She watched the angle of Victoria's left shoulder before every punch, the pivot of her back foot, the way her hips coiled and released like stretched rubber. Every movement had a tell, a warning. Fighters who've been champions too long forget that their bodies often speak louder than their mouths. Victoria shifted to a longer combination. Jab, jab, cross hook. That left hook. Her signature move, the one that had folded countless opponents, came with her whole shoulder, powerful and flashy, made for the camera. Kesha waited until the precise moment when Victoria's hips opened too wide. She dropped her chin, bent her knees, slipped inside the arc of the hook, and snapped a short right counter. Not to knock her down, but to make a point. The sound was small but sharp, a dry crack, like a pebble hitting glass. Victoria's head jerked slightly. Not the kind of blow that made the crowd scream, but enough to make the nearest cameraman forget to breathe. Tom tilted his head, his brow furrowed, then relaxed. The expression of a man who had just confirmed a suspicion. He didn't shout, didn't wave. He simply raised 2 fingers in the air, a signal. Keep your footwork, don't chase. Kesha circled left, pulling Victoria with her, forcing her to rotate again and again. And rotation means oxygen loss. At ringside, Jerry clenched his water bottle, his voice low but urgent. "Vic, don't chase shadows. Hold the center. Cut her angle. Cut her angle." Victoria only half heard. She hated being touched on camera. A hot pulse of pride burned at the back of her neck. She lowered her stance, determined to drive Kesha against the ropes, to trap her where the cameras could catch every second of the scholarship girl, gasping for air, eyes darting, body faltering. The play had been rehearsed 100 times in Victoria's mind. All she had to do now was press play. But the script didn't go as planned. Kesha refused to be cornered in a straight line. Each time she stepped back, she cut diagonally, pivoting lightly on her front foot, changing angles like someone slipping through a revolving door. Sometimes she vanished completely from Victoria's direct line of sight, forcing the champion to turn her whole body just to find her again. In those fleeting shifts, Kesha flicked quick jabs, a soft tap, a mark, then gone. Sometimes she tagged the ribs, right where the abs beneath the sleek crop top failed to tighten in time. "Come here," Victoria snapped, throwing a heavy overhand right. Kesha dipped just half a second early, letting the punch carve wind through her braided hair. As Victoria's body followed its own momentum, Kesha countered. A left hook to the ribs, not strong, but perfectly placed, perfectly timed, right as Victoria's intercostal muscles opened. A sharp escaped before Victoria could swallow it down. The crowd erupted. "Oh!" Their first reaction not for Victoria, but for her opponent. The tone began to shift. What had started as laughter and casual teasing turned into awe. Open, unguarded. A girl lowered her phone completely, eyes wide. "She's beautiful." Another nodded. "Look, her ankles, shoulders, hips, moving like strings of a violin." Someone whispered, "She's not an amateur." Victoria bit her lip, tasting the salt of blood and sweat, her tongue tingling. She hid it with a grin. "What are you, darling? A dancer or a boxer?" Kesha didn't reply. But in that instant, Victoria saw something in her, a depth not of fear, but of solitude, a darkness that wasn't bleeding. It was enduring. Victoria decided to break the rhythm. She stomped, faked a low punch, then aimed to crash through the guard with a looping hook. Stepping close, she slipped her shoulder, parried Kesha's glove to the side, about to drive her left into Kesha's ear. But the moment her glove brushed Kesha's, the girl's other hand was already there. Silent, waiting, as if it had been there all along. A short check hook, tight, minimal, powered by nothing but a sharp hip turn. Victoria's chin popped in a tiny arc. Her eyes blinked for a beat too long. Not a knockdown, but another mark. a whisper that said, "I'm here, I see you, I've learned your rhythm." Jerry shouted from ringside, "Stop playing fancy, hit her straight, press her." Then, realizing the camera was still rolling, he muttered under his breath, "Cut this part later." Victoria's shoes scraped against the wood. She switched targets, going for the body. Heavier punches now, less polished, more labor than show. Kesha took a glancing blow on her left arm, deflected a hook off her glove. Her movements weren't as pristine as before. Sweat gathered along her temples. Her breathing settled lower, steadier. Every time Victoria thought she'd cornered her, Kesha slipped away. One small, quiet step that ruined every calculation. Tom watched closely, not her face, but her feet. He saw what no one else noticed. When her front foot pushed off, when her heel lifted, when she chose to pause half a beat instead of gliding away. He murmured to himself, almost inaudibly, "Not yet. Let her burn her oxygen first." 90 seconds passed, an eternity in boxing. Sweat now misted across Victoria's back like dew, her breathing louder than the music. A cameraman wiped his lens. "Damn, Vic's getting tired." "No, she's testing her." "Testing? She's been hit 3 times already." Victoria caught the last comment, even whispered she heard it. And, as always, her answer was simple. "Hit harder." "Let's go," she growled, lunging forward. Her right cross slammed down like a hammer. Kesha stepped back once, twisting her torso to the right, left glove half blocking, half guiding the punch aside. Victoria couldn't retract in time. The weight of her own strike dragged her forward half a beat. Kesha snapped back like a spring, a short right straight to the forehead, not enough to drop her, but enough to close the window. Before Victoria could refocus, a left hook dug into her 8th rib. 2 punches. Then Kesha stepped away. Calm face, unbroken composure. This time the crowd's sound changed entirely. It wasn't loud, it was sharp. A collective ooh that stretched and then fell silent, as if everyone was waiting for Victoria to respond. A girl in the front row lowered her phone, whispering, "She fights like she's writing." Writing what? Her name. In a flash of anger, Victoria heard herself breathing through a straw. She tried to steady it, to mask it, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted downward, tracing the ring floor, the sponsor logo, the cameras, the faces that no longer smiled like before. Someone was nodding along to Kesha's punches. Someone else murmured, "Beautiful," without even trying to hide it. That was when Victoria's pride clenched inward, tighter than any glove. She hated this feeling, more than pain, more than losing. It was the feeling of losing control of the story. "Keep going, Lightning," Victoria hissed, curling her lip. She said the nickname mockingly. But from the corner, Tom heard it differently. It sounded like recognition. Kesha lifted her chin slightly, not smiling. "Second warning, Victoria. Don't chase the wind when the rain's about to fall." In the final stretch of round 1, Victoria went wild, stomping, swinging heavy hooks, cutting angles with her shoulders. Each time, Kesha either slipped outside or raised a short, firm guard, countering with clean, surgical jabs. No knockouts. Not yet. But every contact made the audience flinch. At second 170, with the digital clock nearing the mark, Kesha broke her pattern. She stopped moving, no backstep, no feint. A bold choice, one that left her seemingly exposed before Victoria's power. Victoria thought she had her. She pulled back her right, pouring every ounce of strength into a single punch meant to tear open the space between them. But the moment her fist left her cheek, Kesha squeezed the trigger, a straight jab to the eye, blinding Victoria's vision with a flash, then a right cross landing square on her cheekbone. "Chack, chack!" Victoria's head snapped half a knuckle to the side. A stunned gasp rose from the crowd. The camera shook in the cameraman's trembling hands. Tom instinctively leaned forward, one foot nearly crossing the ropes, but stopped. He knew Kesha wouldn't chase. She had already stepped back, resetting her stance. The bell rang. End of round 1. No one laughed. The crowd murmured, but this time it wasn't mockery. It was the serious buzz of curiosity. Who is she? Where did she come from? She's not a rookie. Look at her feet. It's like she knows where every punch is going before it lands. Whether by chance or design, every word turned away from the humiliation act that had opened the show. Victoria slumped into her corner. Jerry rushed in, pressing a cold sponge to her cheek, his voice hot and clipped. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Cut angles, stop throwing wide, trap her on the ropes, work the body. Victoria shoved his hand away, panting but trying to sound calm. I know, she's just dodging. I'll catch her rhythm next round. Jerry looked straight into her eyes and saw something he didn't want to admit, the tiniest flicker of doubt. He lowered his voice. Listen to me. Don't fight angry. Cameras are rolling. Sponsors are watching. Across the ring, Tom didn't ice or lecture. He handed Kesha a water bottle and said only 4 words. Front foot, low breath. Kesha rinsed her mouth, spat neatly into the bucket, eyes never leaving Victoria. She spoke just loud enough for Tom to hear. She's not used to being seen losing. Tom smiled slightly, eyes crinkling. And are you used to being seen winning? Kesha shook her head, voice even. I'm used to being seen right. Tom nodded slowly. He could feel the shift. The crowd was no longer waiting to see a poor black girl humiliated. They were watching something else now. A young woman rewriting her place in the story. One step, one breath, one punch at a time. The bell's warning before round 2 chimed softly inside every chest, like clock hands meeting. Victoria clenched her jaw, exhaled through her nose. Take the stage back. Kesha half closed her eyes, shoulders loose. And deep in the memory of Kingston, she heard it. The rain tapping on tin roofs, the sound that once lulled her to sleep. The bell for round 2 was about to ring. The crowd fell completely silent, afraid to scratch the moment. Several phones switched to slow motion, ready to capture every droplet of sweat, every twitch of muscle. When the bell rang, Victoria shot forward like an arrow. But this time, Kesha didn't move. She shifted half a step, reset her heel, drew in a deep breath, and locked eyes with Victoria, her calm as cold as steel. For a fraction of a second, time seemed to collapse, the gym shrinking into a glass box where only 2 bodies moved and one truth waited to emerge. In the front row, a girl whispered, not sure to whom. If that was drizzle before, this is the storm. And at that exact moment, Kesha lifted her left shoulder as bait. Victoria lunged, heavy, direct, exactly as Kesha wanted. Kesha pivoted, letting the punch graze by, then drove a straight right into the open space between Victoria's eye and cheekbone, so fast the camera caught only 2 flickers of light. Victoria froze mid-motion. In that stillness, Kesha followed with a tight left hook to the ribs. A breath burst from Victoria's lungs like air from a punctured tire. The crowd exploded. No more polite gasps. This was cheering, raw and unfiltered. Oh my God! Beautiful! Again! Someone even started clapping. Real applause. Victoria staggered back, vision blurring for half a second. And in that half second, she saw the most terrifying thing of all. Not her opponent, but the faces around her, turning. No one said it aloud, but the shift was clear. Every gaze had swung toward the lightning that had just torn the air. Kesha didn't chase. She stood exactly where she was, breathing evenly, eyes steady. No smile, no triumph. Only the calm of someone who had placed a single stone in the river, the first stone of a bridge called respect. And from here on, the fight truly began. Round 2 opened like air sealed inside glass, dense, fragile, electric. The crowd held its breath, cameras zoomed in close. All that existed was the rhythm of breathing and the soft slap of soles on wood. Victoria clenched her gloves, gasping, eyes blazing. This time, she would trap Kesha, force her to the ropes with all the strength, pride, and experience she had. Kesha stood tall, shoulders loose, eyes unblinking, as if she could read the very beat of her opponent's heart. A charged stillness hung between them. Victoria attacked, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, pouring everything into a single straight assault aimed dead center at Kesha's torso. The first punch met leather, the second slid past, the hook whistled through empty air. The crowd collectively stopped breathing. Kesha moved like smoke, half a step right, heel turning, her body shifting a hand's width. Victoria couldn't adjust in time. Her fourth punch missed clean. In that instant, Kesha fired her first counter, a jab straight to the right eye, just enough to remind Victoria who she was dealing with. Victoria flinched, eyes wide, jaw tight. The crowd roared again, but not for her. Their focus was locked on Kesha now, admiration breaking through disbelief. A few even lowered their phones, holding their breath with every move she made. Victoria steadied herself, throwing a stronger cross, but Kesha had already read the rhythm. She slipped, raised her left shoulder. The punch cut air. Then, in a heartbeat, it happened. 4 precise punches in under 2 seconds. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. A sharp chack cracked through the air. Victoria collapsed, her head twisting to the side, arms trembling as she tried to push herself up, but her legs refused to hold. The entire gym erupted. Cheers, clapping, shouting, "Lightning! Lightning! Lightning!" Tom Rodriguez raised his voice. 10, knockout! Kesha stepped forward, not celebrating. She looked down at Victoria, her voice calm, but cold enough to slice through the noise. "You wanted to teach me a lesson. I hope you've learned that respect doesn't come from skin color, bank accounts, or nationality. It comes from character." Victoria could only stare at her, eyes glistening, for the first time realizing the truth. She hadn't controlled the match, and she had completely misjudged her opponent. The crowd roared around them. Cameras panned across the room, capturing every reaction, every stunned face. Online, the comments shifted instantly, from mockery to shock, from ridicule to admiration. Hashtags like Vox Lightning Campbell and Earned Not Given flooded every platform. Kesha stood in the middle of the ring, drenched in sweat, but her eyes still shining. She didn't smile. She didn't raise her arms. She simply stood tall, reminding everyone watching that this moment was about perseverance, fairness, and inner strength. That day wasn't just another sparring session. It became a turning point. The moment arrogance met determination, and only one remained standing. The one who fought for dignity, for self-worth, and for what she truly deserved. After the match, the air in the gym still buzzed like leftover electricity. No one had left. Phones still rolled. All eyes remained fixed on Victoria, the woman who had just suffered the first knockout of her career. She sat slumped against the ropes, hands shaking, staring blankly at the phone that had streamed her defeat live. For the first time, her pride couldn't save her from the taste of fear and helplessness. The crowd began chanting Kesha's name. Louder, stronger, unified. It wasn't playful anymore. It was admiration. A few young sports journalists scribbled frantically, knowing this footage would go viral within hours. Tom Rodriguez stepped into the center of the ring and placed a hand on Kesha's shoulder. He looked at her with a quiet, proud smile. "You did it, Lightning. This wasn't luck or chance. You proved that determination can beat experience and money." Kesha took a deep breath, glancing toward Victoria with calm eyes. "I never wanted revenge. I just wanted to defend my dignity. And today, everyone saw who truly deserves respect." The video spread like wildfire. Within an hour, hundreds of thousands of views, comments, and shares. The tone had flipped completely, from mocking Victoria to praising Kesha. Hashtags like "Yar Lightning Campbell," "Earned Not Given," and a black excellence dominated social media, turning the knockout into a symbol of perseverance and courage. For Victoria, the fallout was swift and brutal. Major sponsors, Nike, Adidas, Gatorade, all cut ties. Once the perfect face of corporate perfection, she had become the embodiment of arrogance and prejudice. She tried to apologize, to explain, to justify herself on talk shows and online posts. But the internet doesn't forget. Clips of her earlier taunts toward Kesha resurfaced, turning into viral memes overnight. Meanwhile, Kesha received a professional contract offer from Golden Gloves Promotions, a $2 million deal for her first 3 fights, with potential extensions worth up to $50 million if she kept winning. For the first time, her eyes lit up. Not for the money, but for what it meant. A chance to make herself and girls like her seen, respected, and believed in. Soon after, Kesha founded the Lightning Dreams Foundation, dedicated to helping young girls from underprivileged communities, especially black girls, gain access to athletic programs and scholarships. The first opening ceremony took place in Kingston, Jamaica, where she had grown up. The same place she'd first learned that her fists were not just for defense, but for defining who she was. Standing on stage before hundreds of teenagers, Kesha spoke into the microphone, her voice powerful and clear. This story isn't about revenge. It's about dignity, about proving that respect isn't earned through power, money, or race, but through character and perseverance. The children looked at her with wide eyes, not as a celebrity, but as something greater, a symbol of courage and integrity. From the front row, Tom Rodriguez watched silently, eyes misted. He had trained countless champions, but never had he seen someone turn humiliation into a source of hope so profound. 3 months later, Kesha Campbell became the undisputed world champion. During her victory speech, the first people she thanked weren't her coaches or family, but those who had doubted her. "I want to thank everyone who tried to humiliate me, underestimate me, and push me out of the ring. You gave me the fire to prove that true strength doesn't come from where we're born, or the color of our skin. It comes from never letting anyone define our limits." In a small apartment in Miami, Victoria Sterling watched the match on television and, for the first time, understood the difference between talent and greatness. Talent is something you're born with. Greatness is something you forge through pain, adversity, and persistence. Kesha Campbell hadn't just won a match in Manhattan. She had rewritten the definition of strength, of worthiness, and of what it means to transform humiliation into spiritual power that inspires others. The spotlight shone on her face, gloves still on, fists steady, holding her own power. She smiled softly, knowing that storms don't destroy the strong. They cleanse and shape them. After her historic win, the atmosphere around Kesha changed completely. No more tension, no more doubt, only light, admiration, and respect. Journalists, trainers, and young athletes all looked at her differently. They no longer saw a small black girl from Jamaica. They saw a symbol of endurance, dignity, and strength. Kesha signed her first professional contract with Golden Gloves Promotions, $2 million for her first 3 fights, with a possible $50 million extension. But the money wasn't the point. The real victory was this: the power to change how the world sees young black women like her. Those once dismissed, underestimated, or unseen, now standing in the center of the ring, blazing with their own light. At the same time, Kesha founded the Lightning Dreams Foundation, created to help young girls from underprivileged communities, especially black girls, gain access to sports and scholarship programs. The first opening ceremony was held in Kingston, Jamaica, her hometown, surrounded by cheers from hundreds of children and parents. Kesha stood on stage, microphone in hand, eyes steady, her voice echoing through the hall. This story isn't about revenge. It's about dignity, about proving that respect doesn't come from power, money, or skin color, but from character and perseverance. The children watched her as if witnessing a real-life hero, not because of her victories, but because of her spirit, her courage, and her determination. In the front row, Tom Rodriguez sat silently, a single tear tracing down his face. He had trained many champions, but he had never seen anyone transform humiliation into inspiration and strength like this. Kesha's story spread across the internet like wildfire. The video of her Manhattan fight became a global phenomenon. Hashtags Lightning Campbell and earned. Not given dominated social media. People everywhere saw a young black woman, once mocked and underestimated, defeat a world champion and rewrite the story of what respect and power truly mean. Victoria Sterling, on the other hand, watched it all unfold from her small apartment in Miami. For the first time, she understood that pride and titles couldn't protect her from reality. The major brands she had represented, Nike, Adidas, Gatorade, terminated their contracts. The fortune that once symbolized power now meant nothing. She tried to explain, to apologize on talk shows and social media. But the internet doesn't forgive or forget. Clips of her mocking Kesha were resurrected and turned into global memes, forever linked to her arrogance and downfall. Meanwhile, Kesha continued to train, preparing for her upcoming professional matches. She had become a role model for hundreds, even thousands of young girls. Those who saw themselves in her story, who were inspired to never let anyone define their limits. One afternoon, inside a quiet gym in Kingston, Kesha stood before the mirror, drenched in sweat after training. Sunlight streamed through the window, reflecting off her face and her still-gloved hands. She smiled faintly, realizing that every hardship, the poverty, the humiliation, the street fights in Kingston, had shaped her into the woman she had always wanted to become, a symbol of strength, resilience, and dignity. At her first professional award ceremony, holding the trophy high above her head, Kesha spoke firmly. "I want to thank everyone who ever underestimated me, mocked me, or tried to humiliate me. You gave me the reason to prove that true strength doesn't come from where we're born, or the color of our skin. It comes from never letting others define our limits." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. And in Kesha's eyes, every insult, every hardship, every bruise had turned into power. Lightning Campbell, the lightning bolt that didn't just shake a boxing match, but electrified an entire generation. The story ends, but its message remains. Perseverance, dignity, and courage are the truest forms of strength. And those who once looked down on others for their skin color or background will eventually learn the greatest lesson, that power isn't measured by titles, but by heart and will. Kesha Campbell's story isn't just about a boxing match. It's living proof of how determination can't be bought, and dignity can't be taken away. When she stepped into the ring, she carried with her every hardship she'd ever faced. The poverty, the humiliation, and the dreams buried beneath them. With every punch, she didn't just defeat Victoria Sterling. She conquered prejudice, silence, and the fear within herself. Kesha proved that respect isn't earned through fame, wealth, or color, but through character, grit, and relentless perseverance. What she achieved after the fight, signing her first professional contract, founding the Lightning Dreams Foundation, and inspiring hundreds of young girls, taught a lasting lesson. When people underestimate you, sometimes the greatest opportunity is to use their doubt as fuel to become extraordinary. Her journey stands as proof that sometimes the ones most underestimated are the strongest of all. And when pride meets persistence, there's only one outcome. The light of truth and real talent will always shine through. If Kesha's story moved you, subscribe so you don't miss more powerful stories of ordinary people turning adversity into extraordinary strength. What do you think about Kesha's journey? Do you believe we can all turn rejection into motivation to rise higher? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and share so her story can inspire others around the world.